what actually is content development? And I would just want to take an opportunity at this point to remind you to take down as many notes as you possibly can as we progress through this lesson, just to make sure that you're comfortable with the content, you can easily get familiar with it in your own understanding, and just so that you can really ensure this content sinks in the best possible way. Essentially, content development is researching, producing, and publishing information to meet a strategic goal. So looking for and actually coming up with information we publish for our audiences. This could be to encourage engagement, generate leads, encourage sales, etc., and many more different variables of goals. It all depends again on what your business objectives are and obviously your marketing goals. So where does the content development actually come into play? If we leave it in the digital space, as this is a digital marketing course after all, we would develop content for our websites, blogs, white papers, or ebooks, emails, and newsletters, as well as video and social media too. These are all in the different digital spheres where we have to think about our content and obviously how it is positioned in those different sectors. If we want to speak about content, there is one more big thing that we have to mention before we move any further, which is something we call copywriting. Please write that down. And according to a very well-known copy blogger, copywriting is the art and science of strategically delivering words, whenever written or spoken, that get people to take some form of action. So when we are writing a copy of some sort, that is what you would call the text. When we try and phrase it in a way that persuades your audience to buy your product, share your post, leave a review, etc. Again, trying to essentially just deliver your business objectives, we would refer to it as the copywriting approach or the copywriting strategy. So where we need to obviously be active in terms of copywriting is what we need to focus on right now. And where should that focus be for us? Well, essentially it's required in any location that we actually develop content for. You would need to write a copy. So social media posts, video ads, you would probably have a script for those and a description too, right? Search ads, banners, emails, etc. So where there is content, there has to be a copy, and that's the very nature of copywriting. So we now know what kind of digital environments we have content in, which is basically everywhere if you think about it in today's day and age. So let's have a look at what kind of formats that we can find a copy in. So essentially there are 4 different types of content that we deal with in the digital marketing space. And first of all, we have text. Then we have images, video, and also files. This could be different PDF files, for example, that can be downloaded, and many different formats as well, as I'm sure you understand, and I'm sure that you have used up until this point too. You could also argue that sound would be another type of content. And this is what we would refer to as just general videos, where we add videos to different platforms. And we could also have sound only content in the form of, you guessed it, podcasts. Today, podcasts are really taking the world by storm. At some point in time, if you haven't already, I'm sure you will definitely jump onto a podcast and maybe even find one that you really enjoy and listen to week. Anyway, let's look at these 4 types of content in a little bit more detail so that you can get an understanding of what they entail and perhaps even get some inspiration from them. So let's start off with text. We would essentially use text for updates on current events, for example, any other sort of news, business updates, industry updates, and thought leadership too, which is something that we have spoken about before. We would use text to share insights on the industry and obviously show that we are an expert in the field. If you look to the right here, I have an example of a brand called No Name Brand, which produces food and household products and sells them to the supermarket in Canada. They have quite an interesting brand voice, as I'm sure you can imagine, and they are very literal and descriptive in everything that they do. This screenshot is from their Twitter account, where they decided to live tweet the Oscars in their very typical brand voice, getting straight to the point. So even with this minimalist way of communicating, it's quite possible to make a really big impact. And as I'm sure you can see from the text that is portrayed in these tweets, they found a way to take the current events such as the Oscars, which a lot of people can actually relate to, and made it their own. So don't be afraid to comment on what's going on out there. Just make sure that you do your research, and that's what it really comes down to, and what really matters, to make sure that your content is all engaging and obviously relative to the market that is actually engaging with it on a day-to-day basis. Then we have images. What we would include here is mainly product images, so essentially featuring what you're actually selling, your brand images really. This might be a bit hard to imagine, but if you look here on the left, another tweet from the no-name brand, I would classify this as a brand image, something written in their typical get-to-the-point style. Other images that you could come up with would be such as quotes or customer quotes, more specifically, encouraging images, facts, useful tippy reminders, ideas to try, infographics, and also memes, which are taking the world by storm and have been for many years already. You know, those funny little images with captions that really just spark a humorous bone in everyone's body? Have fun with them, and that's what the whole idea is. But please, whatever you do, don't call them memes. So as you can see, quite a few of these images are actually text-based or have some sort of element of text in them, which is why our copywriting skills are actually needed to be on point. So don't be afraid to experiment. You know what they say, practice always makes perfect. Now next up we have video, and there are so many things that you can actually do with video. The playing field is really not limited at all. How-to videos, product demos, interviews, Q&As, behind the scenes, and about us videos are so vitally important for engagement because they really spark some sort of engagement that opens up the doors of creativity that haven't truly been explored to the full extent yet. The amount that you can get into explaining different products or even getting some sort of influencers to review your products is really exciting. And for the consumer or the person who is engaging with the content of the video, it is really exciting to stay engaged, to see different perspectives of how they engage with your product, what their personal perspectives are, and obviously how they review it so that they can obviously justify whether going out and purchasing your product is going to be worth it or not. So don't hesitate to take part in creating video, but always make sure that if there is text involved in the video, you make sure your copywriting skills come into play and you do your due diligence accordingly. And then, last but not least, we have files, and that would include an example such as slides. And then obviously we also have ebooks and brochures, so essentially just the digital versions of printed ones. Guides, catalogs, magazines, checklists, planners, instructions, and also worksheets. So again, a lot of variety, a lot of things to choose from if you plan on sharing files with your audience. So let's have a look at what content you would actually find on which one of our digital marketing channels that we've spoken about. So on your website, for example, you can share text, images, video files, and a whole bunch of other content that could be compressed and obviously uploaded then. And here at this point, to inform, educate, and guide your audience, you could then upload as much as you really wanted to from an engagement perspective. Keep that in mind and take that opportunity right now just to write it down so that you can already start thinking by the time you put up your website what you would want to engage with your audience. So blog posts, for example, would be a great way of accomplishing that. Adding infographics, thought leadership articles, premium content like ebooks, that would all be really exciting engagement and certainly draw in traffic to your website. You want to be able to inform your visitors about different services or products. And you can add client testimonials onto the website too, which is always really great from a reference or validation perspective on your services or products. Then we have social media. You would use the same content types, but there are so many different platforms within this channel to make use of and obviously pay attention to. And obviously paying attention to each one obviously takes a diverse way of thinking because they all have their different requirements and different type of reach, but the content remains the same. So staying consistent is very important and one thing that we should definitely remain aware of. On YouTube, you can only post videos. LinkedIn will let you upload files to Instagram as well and link everything parallel to one another. So obviously understanding which is the best platform for your business is vitally important to remember. Moving on, we have PPC. And here you could go with text, images, or even video. When it comes to ads, well, all content really, we want to be able to make sure that we stand out. That's the whole idea and purpose of marketing in general. Standing out over the rest or standing out amongst the rest is vitally important to figure out how to do successfully. There is so much advertising going on these days that it can be really hard to stand out from the masses. However, we'll go through some tips on how to do that successfully in just a bit. And then we have email, obviously. This is a really great channel, but obviously it's still really popular. As old as it might seem, yes, it is still really popular. And we'll go into it a bit deeper on how to successfully email markets in about module 4 of this program. But if you stick with some of the content development tips from today's lesson, you should already be off to a really great start. For SMS and instant messaging, generally our content type is text. Make sure to really go into getting to the point with regards to this style of communication, and be sure to keep it short, because you really don't want to bore your audience or be a nuisance to them at all. And then we obviously have apps, where we could again counter all the different types of content that we have. Let's have a quick look at what kind of approaches marketers are actively taking nowadays. SEMrush, for example, a marketing tool that is going to come up quite a bit more in future, have conducted a survey in 2020 asking marketers about which kind of content that they're actually producing. They found that blog posts dominated, with 92% of marketers writing them. They also have so many great benefits for SEO and connecting your audience. And this is followed by emails. And trust me, this is a channel that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Then infographics were also listed amongst the big thing that people focus on for their audience reach and communication. And I'm sure it's going to grow even more from where it currently is. And then if we look at the channels that marketers are currently using to distribute their content, organic search is really a big factor here, which is closely followed by social media and obviously email marketing. And then we have PPC with 47% of marketers, which is really not that surprising, as I guess most marketers do prefer sharing their content organically. Keeping an eye on stats like these always gets pretty handy to see what others are doing out there, and obviously where you fall amongst the competitors with your style of engagement. If it's working for them, it might work for you. Keep that in consideration. Or if you want to go completely against the flow, or against the grain, if one might say, you could always try to go the opposite of what everyone else is doing to try be disruptive and obviously stand out in that specific manner. Keep that in mind, but creativity is really all based on the artist's perspective. And as a marketer, you need to see yourself as some sort of artist of creativity. But no matter what the general statistics say, always keep in mind that you're creating content for your audience and your personas. So always keep them in mind in whatever you do. What stage of the funnel are they in? This is a vital question to ask, and always just keep in mind, no matter what stage you're in your creativity developments in your marketing strategy. But remember, depending on that, they will need different types of information and obviously different types of messages too. Then you need to remember what you want to achieve with your content. Keep your business goals in mind, and then obviously going further, you need to think about what you need to do in order to achieve that goal. Do you want to entertain your audience? In this case, a funny meme might just be the trick that you need in order to do that. Do you want to inspire them? You might want to publish a motivational quote by someone who is impactful in your specific industry. Do you maybe want to educate your users? You could then publish a blog post in that case with a very useful information styled approach. Or you might want to build a relationship with the user. A behind the scenes video might do the trick on this too. Or do you want to advertise to sell your product or service? In that case, we'll have to craft a convincing ad, which is something that we'll get into towards the end of this lesson. So stay tuned for that. It's going to really get exciting. Then, the next thing that you have to think about is how easily the piece of content is to consume. Think about what kind of lifestyle your audience is leading. Are they extremely busy? Then you'll need to obviously keep it short and precise and just get straight to the point. Will they be working all day? In that case, an email might be a good idea just to brush over and obviously store in case they might want to rather look at it later on in their day. Do they have time to read a long blog post, or will a short infographic be better for them? You also need to ask yourself what you can do consistently. Once you start publishing content, you're setting expectations for the users. There is no point in producing one amazing video for every couple of months or so. It might be a very temporary impact that you could have, but it won't do much for your business. If you can't produce this type of content consistently, then start small and then build it up from there. And then of course, you can meet quality expectations. This ties in with publishing consistently. You might want to publish a 10-minute video every week, but if you don't have enough time to produce high quality content, your users will not even bother watching it. Have consistency in good quality. That is very important too. Always keep this at the back of your mind. We are creating content for our personas, meaning our customers, not just to look like we're actually doing something. So we need to provide value. Now that we know what types of contents are out there, and in the digital marketing space there's almost an endless possibility, especially with new developments being made so frequently, let's take an opportunity to look at the actual content and how to come up with some really interesting ideas that we can utilize. One way that we should always work is to try find out what our competitors are doing. Always start with what the competitors are doing so that we know how to position ourselves if we're not already in the playing field. Chances are they're targeting a similar audience to you. So something that works well for them might also work for you as well. It's not stealing, it's inspiration, and that's how the marketing industry really works. Then in general, we always want to be aware of what types of posts are popular, what types of contents are popular, and research can really help with this. So make sure to stay on top of what your particular market is interested in, how they're reacting to certain things, and what the current trends in the market are. We also then need to stay on top of the industry news and be aware of what's going on out there. What kind of developments are being made, and are there any issues that might be transpiring in our sector that could affect it? Is there anything controversial going on? We don't want to be blindsided, so making sure that we stay up to date and stay involved in what's going on around us is vitally important and could strategically help us as well. Another great way of generating ideas for your content is to look at social media and outline communities. What are people talking about? What interests do they have? What is the buzz at the moment? Those current trends are vitally important to stay on top of as a marketer. Social media is a great channel for you to engage in your audience and obviously get to know a bit more about them. Ask them questions in their own views, incorporate quotes, and go into content in a bit more detail to get their perspective of what's being spoken about. The same goes for community boards or forums. What kind of things are people struggling with at the moment? What problems do they have? You want to provide a solution, and that's what marketing is all about. For example, your hairdresser. You might want to check out some beauty forums to see what type of things the users are struggling with when it comes to their hair. You might want to look at identifying different patterns of people not knowing what type of hairstyle matches their face. Or you could even get into creating a guide of hairstyles that would suit the type of a different type of face shape for both men and women. This could be quite interesting and obviously quite engaging and quite uplifting for people who might be struggling with this type of problem. So get engaging, get interesting, get creative, and obviously that will definitely drive the engagement that you need to get some sort of momentum in speaking about certain topics or different trends. Another great idea for generating ideas is to brainstorm. Have a session with your team, exchange ideas, and just understand that nothing should be off the table when it comes to brainstorming. Different minds will usually come up with a lot of different ideas, so that can be a great source to start with. A big thing to think about as well is user-generated content, or UGC for short. Basically, it's the name that describes the content that your audience creates. Not only does it take some work off your shoulders personally when it comes to actually producing content, but it does loads in terms of social proof, showing your brand and spreading awareness. Think about it. Who would you believe more, a brand or a friend? Of course a friend, right? And if your friend is recommending something to you, what's very likely going to be the outcome? Well, that you at least check it out for yourself first. So with users posting content about your brand, maybe as a part of a competition or challenge, they're basically giving you a vote of confidence, which strengthens your credibility, leading to more awareness about your brand. You can then reuse those types of content and publish them to your own channels, again helping you become more credible. It gives you some variety and obviously adds a human touch to your brand too, which is vitally important. Another great way to come up with new ideas for your content is to, well, not come up with new ideas for your content, but instead repurposing content that you've already published before. Now that I don't mean redoing exactly what you've done in the past before, but it's more of a, let's call, recycling activity where you take a piece of content that you've published already and use the same content but publish it in a different format. This could help you reach an entirely different audience As you know, different audiences prefer to consume different types of content. So if you publish the same type of information but wrapped into different formats, you have much bigger chance of being seen. Now, repurposing your content will also help by reinforcing your message. It's a way of repeating information without seeming too spammy, and obviously it will help you in achieving a more organic visibility that you can rely on. Now, how do you determine what piece of content will actually be used in these publishers? Well, for this, of course, we would use the data that we've created and the data that we've received from the metrics in our measuring systems. And at this stage, you'll hopefully know where to get the insights from your different channels. And don't worry, if you're still not too comfortable with how to do that, you're more than welcome to revisit the lessons that we've covered, or just go over the summary notes or webinar slides, and I'm sure that you'll have some sort of aha moment as to how to do it on each one of these platforms, so that you can really help fast track your overall efficiency and effectiveness with how you pull that data through, and obviously more importantly, how you utilize it. So let's have a look at some examples of what this might look like. Say, for example, you identified a popular blog post, and let's say it's on the best restaurants in your city, including the specific criteria that was judged on. You could quite easily make a vlog out of the different talking points of your experience. And in general, anything that you can blog about, you can also vlog about. You could also create an infographic showing what to look out for when you go to a restaurant, or when you try to identify the best possible restaurant to go to for the week. And you could also speak about potential warning signs as well, so keep that in mind as well. If you have several blog posts, you could easily collate them and make an ebook out of them too. Keep that in mind and write that down so you don't forget that piece of information or that so-called hint that I've just given you. Then another thing that you could do is take a piece of text, say a tweet for example, and convert it into an image for, let's say, Instagram. If you had a funny quote that people liked, for example, you could quite easily make this engaging for a visual image perspective on Instagram. Keep that in mind, and obviously try to get as creative as you can utilizing the same content over different platforms. And then obviously just think about whether your product requires a manual. Maybe there's a way for you to convert this file in a how-to video for a product demo. The same present, just different wrapping. And that's something that we need to think about in our style of content development. How can we take the same present, wrap it differently, and present it to different audiences on different platforms and make it as engaging, and if not maybe more engaging each time we repost it? That's the purpose of the strategy, and that's something I'd like you to think about the more and more we mature into this program. So now that we have talked about the actual content, let's have a look at how we actually write a copy and what we need to pay attention to more specifically. While this is not content and a blogging course, I do want to share some helpful tips with you. However, if you do need some more specifics on this topic, please do take an opportunity to go check out our blogging course. It's really insightful and really exciting as well. So the first thing to consider is the use the right language approach. All right, use the right language approach in everything that you do. Are you being conversational or formal? A law firm would probably expect to be a bit more formal, whereas a nightclub would use a more outgoing language. Remember to publish content with a high quality, not a high quantity. Then, for content on our websites, we want to write at least 300 words. That absolute minimum is 300 words. But ideally, that would be no more than 2,000 words to help with your SEO. All right, keep that in mind. That's a little bracket there, something to consider in all of your website engagement. If you include statistics, research, and quotes into your content, this will give you more credibility as well, as users will not just have to take your word for what you're saying, but will also have some sort of proof and see that you're not just claiming things to be true. So it gives you the sort of validity standing point as well. Of course, we don't only want to write quality content, but we want to include some quality images and graphics too. Of course, we need to proofread everything that we're writing first, and obviously publishing to avoid mistakes. We want to make sure that whatever we publish can be read easily and can easily be flowed through. The amount of times that I've seen a dark blue text on a dark gray background is absolutely shocking. So whatever you do, make sure that it's easy on the eye, that you use proper spacing in paragraphs, and make sure that the copy is not too small. And then last but not least, try tell a story, ladies and gents, because there's nothing more engaging and easy to follow and exciting to read than a story. The moment you can create a captivating hook through the nature of a story is the moment that you'll be able to really engage properly with your audience, hold them in, and be able to utilize them into purchasing a product or a service, or maybe just expand further throughout your business as well. Please do keep that in mind in everything that you do. Then for some general rules of copywriting, we want to write attention-grabbing headlines. Your headline is probably the most important part of your copy, because no one will read the rest if the headline doesn't immediately grab their attention. So we want to ensure that we use clear and direct words. No point in beating around the bush here, ladies and gents. Avoid fluff in this case. In many cases, you won't have enough characters to convey the full message that you have envisioned. So practicing this headline grabbing attention style is very, very important. We also want to inspire readers to actually take action. That's why we make use of something called a call to action with regards to these headlines, which is basically letting people know what they should do. Ever seen a little phrase in an email, for example, saying, click here, sign up now? That's essentially a call to action. Very powerful tool that is indeed. It might also sound like a very obvious thing to do when someone sees an ad and they're interested, therefore clicking on and commenting or sharing it, right? It's a very obvious thing to do. It might sound like a very obvious thing for the average person to do. Someone sees an ad, is interested, and therefore clicks and comments or shares it, right? That's wrong. It's not an obvious thing to do, and something that you would generally expect of someone is not always the action that they take. Tell them what the next step is. And then we want to build up the trust from there. Convey that you're reliable, and if you've obviously been around for a long time, show it and obviously prove it. Use things that you can actually prove, such as 4 out of 5 of your customers will recommend you to their friends. When it comes to speaking about things to avoid, we should focus on not being pompous, alright, or self-important. People don't like egos, even if they have a massive one themselves. If you aren't the best, as in you haven't ever been voted or determined to be the best or biggest authority in your industry or specific field, then don't say that you are. There are very many other ways that you can convey the very same thing. Leaders in manufacturing or top-class service, etc. Be creative, but don't lie. Don't use jargon or difficult words. These are the same thing. Unless they are solely advertising to people who are experts in the industry, jargon really isn't necessary. If you sell images, for example, you wouldn't say 300 dpi images are at great prices. You would rather say something like crystal clear images at great prices. Difficult words makes it difficult for engagement between you and your audience. So don't say things like prepossessing when you could say beautiful. You know what I mean? And then finally, well, at least on this topic more specifically, don't exaggerate. Let's say you own a restaurant. Don't say there's nothing worse than cold food. There are plenty of things worse than cold food, okay? We all know a lot of things that are worse than cold food. When trying to inject some humor, exaggeration can have a place, but otherwise, just tend to avoid it rather. Now we've arrived at the last part of our lesson, actually crafting an ad that could turn viewers into customers. There are a couple of things that you should take into consideration in order to make this successful. First of all, we want to solve a problem with our ads. Dropchef provides their customers with the exact measurements of ingredients to cook their meals. And that is the problem that so many of us, including myself, encounter when having to cook dinner. Leftover stress and choosing what to cook, shopping for ingredients, it all adds up. Dropchef has the solution for that. Let's look at the first 3 sentences for this ad. No shopping, no stress, no waste. Attention grabbing headline, right? And that's really what we've been speaking about up until this point. Now, with a headline like that, if you have a passion for cooking and you have experience maybe under or over catering at times, and maybe over or spending too with the ingredients that you go out and look for, then this is definitely going to be catching for you, and obviously you would want to engage with the video. We also want to use emotional triggers in our copy and advertisements, something that consumers could relate to. Let's look at this ad over here by Playo. They're a business who help other companies keep track of their finances, and the way that they phrase their ad company finances keeping you awake at night? Change that. So simple, but very powerful, right? Their audience is probably able to relate to this problem immediately. This is what we want. And now some of you might actually just sit there and go, well, I don't have this problem at all. And that's okay, because essentially we don't want to target everyone. We want to only target our segmented audience. So don't be afraid to come up with content that won't just fit the masses. Stick to what your target audience wants to hear and keep that as your focal point. Then we want to highlight the benefits of our products rather than the features themselves. We also want to tell customers, hey, my product can do this and that, focused instead of showing off all the ways that your product can improve a customer's life. Take this ad from Ava, for example. Their product offering is some sort of camera for online teaching. Are they talking about the image or the sound quality or something like that in their ad? No. They focus on the fact that with the help of this camera, online classes will become more intuitive and engaging, focusing on the problems their target audience are facing. As someone talking to you now working on online education, I can definitely say that this ad speaks to me. And then finally, we want to make use of people's FOMO, the fear of missing out. So use deadlines or other means of showing that what you're offering might not be available at a specific point in the future. Like this ad from Ela Shade, up to 70% off until stock runs out. Works wonders. Just make sure not to overuse this tactic and obviously not blatantly lie, because consumers are a lot smarter than what you might think, and they obviously pick up on things like this. Now we've had a look at what we want to pay attention to when writing our ads, but let's take this a few steps further. When it comes to writing a copy, there are a couple of formats that you can use. Don't worry, no maths, I promise. The following ones are the 3 most important examples that we can consider right away. So the first formula is PAS, which stands for Problem, Agitate, Solution. What does that exactly mean though? So let's go back to our very first favorite example of custom comfort. And as we know what kind of problems their audience is struggling with, well, at least we know for Elegant Elizabeth, that is, the buyer persona we created in lesson 4, just a reminder, she's struggling with finding a proper space to relax after work and spending quality time with her partner. So back to our formula. Let's start with the problem. Now the problem is that we want to focus on obviously highlighting what the issue is for that person or that target audience faces more specifically. But in this case, obviously we refer to a specific persona. In our case, this could be, are you struggling with winding down after coming home from work? That could be a really big problem for many, especially in today's stressful work environments. Then we want to agitate that problem. So we want to add a little bit of a highlight to how people could potentially provoke a reaction to that title. Essentially, want to take it a step further and really bring in the emotion to it all. Does the stress of office keep you restless and prevent you from spending quality time with your family? Now that really does provoke emotion, and we're just provoking emotion to a pre-existing problem over here. The last part is then to offer the solution to the problem that we just described. How about creating your own safe haven at home? Custom comfort allows you to design your own sofa for ultimate comfort to help you wind down, re-energize, and focus on your family. If we know what our buyer personas are struggling with, this is how detailed and specific we can actually become. We'll go through the options of actually targeting the right people in later lessons, but for now, just be aware of the fact that we can get really specific when it comes to choosing who will actually see our ads, and obviously how they engage with them. The next example is the BAB formula, before, after, bridge. So in before, you describe the current situation of your buyer's persona. It's often difficult to wind down after work with the stress of office staying in your head all day long, right? That's something that we're highlighting in the before. When we move to from before to after, we describe the ideal scenario of what it could be like. What if you could create your own safe haven at home to recharge and wind down so that you're in the best mood when you're spending quality time with your family? Isn't this what anyone would actually want, really? And then it comes to the bridge. Now, what are we doing at the bridge? We're going to show customers and our consumers exactly what we're going to do in order to help get them there. Custom comfort is the solution. Design your own sofa for ultimate comfort and relaxation. And then look at this. The call to action is in there, but not too pushy. I really love this formula and something that I would like everyone to make sure that they use at some point in time when it comes to their engagement. So let's move on to our last copywriting formula of the lesson. And just on that note, make sure to also test these different formulas to find out what your audience responds to best. There are lots of other ones out there, but we don't really have the amount of time that we need in order to discuss them in detail in this lesson. But do feel free to have a look around. Anyway, so let's move on to AIDA, A-I-D-A. We already know this from the sales funnel, but it can also be used as a formula in this perspective. First of all, you want to capture the reader's attention by writing a strong headline. Don't be afraid to be a little bit provocative in this case. Wherever you go, stress seems to follow you around, from office to home. Alright, that's quite provocative in its own. Next, we want to get the reader's interest by going into detail a bit more and obviously elaborating on what that problem is. Of course, it's not the same, but you need to find a way to relax and re-energize. Then we take it a step further and try awaken the user's desire by offering a solution to their problem. Custom Comfort lets you design your own sofa so that you can create your own safe haven at home. And then we really drive it home by adding our call to action. Contact us now to get a personal quote. Alright, I really hope this shows the importance for us and how we can use these different approaches to engage with our consumers and create some sort of urgency to what we're doing through the use of engaging ads.